Hi there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Erin from Everlearning, Hayley from Taking a Kinder Path, and myself, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, consent-based learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us.
Welcome to the virtual kitchen table. I'm Erin and I'm here with Ashley. Hello, Ashley.
Hi.
And Sue Elvis from Stories of an Unschooling Family is joining us again. Hello, Sue.
Hello, Erin, and hello, Ashley.
This is so fun today because we are finishing up. We think we're finishing up this time. We're working through Hayley's three-part series, What is Unschooling? And we are back to continue with the third part, which is about misconceptions, myths and misconceptions. So we got partway through last time. So if you want to hear the beginning of this conversation, I would head back to the prior episode. And there were so many good pieces to connect about that we decided to continue on rather than cut it short. So we are back. And something, it's kind of funny, something came to my mind this afternoon before we connected here and started recording. And I was thinking how the feelings I was having about recording today were very far kind of from unschooling, in the sense that because it's the third part and now we're continuing the third part, I don't know about either of you, but sometimes I get a sense of like there's so many thoughts that I want to get out, or like pieces of information that I want to pass on. And I was almost feeling like pressured, as far as, okay, what haven't we talked about? What should we try to, I was looking at Hayley's different points and thinking, what would be important to add, and almost feeling like a sense of scarcity of like, it's our job to get all the information out and all the points discussed. And I thought about how that's actually much more like a schooled attitude, as far as kind of having to cram all the information in to a certain amount of time, or a time frame. And really, there will be other episodes that we can that we can talk about things. And the other thing is, there are always gaps, right? That's the other thing when we're talking about our kids learning, or any of our learning, there are always going to be gaps, and like, that's okay. So it was just a funny, I don't know, it was just like a feeling I was having, of feeling a little bit like ill at ease. And then I thought, oh, this is kind of ironic. So anyway.
This is a really good. If people haven't listened to the rest of your episodes, Erin, then we can't say everything in these four, yeah. But there's a wealth of other podcast episodes on your channel that people can go and dive into.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of, as you said, you'll be back with more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's another piece
You
to it.
can't say it all at once because
You
this is
can't.
life, and we're learning as we go as well. Even though we've been doing this a long time, it's just that it's such a deep and interesting way of life that you have to give up. You can't say everything. And
No.
people have to go out there and experience it for themselves. But hopefully, people will listen and think, wow, I would really love to go and experience this and learn it for myself, enjoy this lifestyle. And maybe in our conversations, we've given people some ideas to start with.
Hmm. Well, you know this so well, Sue, from you've done so much writing on your blog, and it's true, there's always more to say. And the other unschooly aspect of it is the idea that, you know, in this case as podcast hosts, but in with our kids, like as parents, it's not just about us passing on information. We trust that our kids can find things on their own too. So it's the same with this. So Okay. So we left off, pardon me, talking about curriculum and checklists and just some of those more conventional ways of learning. And so I think the next of Hayley's points that we're going to continue on with today is unschooling leaves children behind, uneducated, and unprepared for the real world. Okay, just to clarify, that's the misconception, not what we're saying. That's Hayley's next misconception. So,
No, do you know what's going to happen? Someone's going to Google unschooling
yeah,
leaves children behind, and AI is going to come out and say, yes, it does. Go listen to Virtual Kitchen Table podcast. That's the
it was
source.
just thinking that when you said that. That's so funny. Okay, so Hayley says, we could go down all kinds of rabbit holes here. What is this real world we speak of? The whole world contains a wide array of diversity, different climates and communities, lifestyles and cultural expectations, for which none of us could be wholly prepared for sure. Yet, if we scale it back and think about our local area of the world, why would children from unschooling families be any less prepared for the world than their peers? Given many of these peers spend much of their time in or preparing for school, a rather unique world of its own, the like rarely found elsewhere. Okay. Um, and then she says the question of what it means to be educated is an interesting one and means different things to different people. Okay. So she goes on to say some other things, but why don't we start with that right there? Just the fact that yeah, we're all living in different places. We have different communities, different families, different value systems. So I love how she said, "What is this real world we speak of?" Because that's such a good point, right? So even the idea of kind of how to um, practically or financially live and survive means something completely different from place to place and family to family. So it's so specific. Any thoughts come up for either of you on this one as a starting point?
I just always find this one really, I can't say I've spent a lot of time worrying about this or thinking about it because it seems like such a funny one to me. Because I just see, maybe this is almost too simple to say, but I just see our kids living this lifestyle while they're unschooling and they're in the real world every single day. Um, so yeah, this idea that I mean, I guess it comes partly from the idea that when they're in school, I'm just trying to think if we've kind of touched on this already, but like when you're in school, well, you're told no a lot. You're told what to do almost all the time. Um, you have someone, yeah, in charge. You do work with other people. Um, it's different. And I guess that comes from this idea of once our kids are growing up and they're in, say, a full-time job, they have to know how to do all of those things, right? They have to know how to follow instructions, um, kind of be told what to do, all that type of stuff. Like that's kind of where my head goes when I think about this stuff. Um, and I don't like that because I mean, some of that's true, but there's so many different possibilities for our kids for when they're adults. Like we don't know what
Mhm.
their job will look like, and especially now, right? Like it's just changed so much. Maybe you could say that this was more true in the past, like a fair bit. um, but I guess I don't think you need to be in school to learn those things either. So say our kids do grow up and they, do find themselves in a position. I'm just using the job as an example. There'd be other things as well we could talk about. Um, I mean, I don't think it's too hard to um, work for a boss, for example, if you didn't go to school and have a teacher telling you what to do. Um, or work with other people. That's not a great, I don't like using that example because I don't know. I'm maybe I'll let one of you guys share because I find this one a little bit harder to understand why this is a misconception, I guess, because um, school is, I think, in my opinion anyway, school is very different from the real world, even when you are comparing it to a job place. But I've just kind of always assumed that that's what people are getting at with this, that that's what they're worried about, that, yeah, that they won't be able to kind of like wait in line and wait their turn and follow instructions and commit to like finishing a project and stuff like that. But I'm sure there's other things as well, but that's where my mind's kind of gone. And I've just never worried about that being an
Mhm,
issue,
mhm, mhm.
if that made any sense.
No, I do think, yeah, and I do think that's what people are. I think people are talking about kind of what you said. Will they be able to follow direction, be part of a team? Will they be able to put? Uh, will they be able to have the self discipline to put
Mhm,
other tasks ahead of what they want to do? I think. I mean, I've heard it broken down specifically. Will they be able to get up in the morning and get
mhm,
themselves organized and get out? I do think it comes from this idea of kind of assuming sort of a sheltered, self-centered existence, and then having to branch out and meet needs of other people and follow instructions. And um, like I think part of the problem with this is that you could have there's all kinds of people who go through all kinds of years of school and have a really hard time with the real world, like so many people.
yeah.
And it could be that a kid could be homeschooled or unschooled, and there might be areas that they might struggle with, but it's not necessarily related, so I think just assuming that that's going to be the case is a very kind of a I guess I understand where it comes from, but I don't think it takes too much thinking to realize that. Um, I guess it depends on how much exposure people have had, though, to kids who haven't grown up in school. I think for me, my experience with my kids is that if anything, I almost feel like it's the opposite. Like my kids have really described, everything from being in post-secondary education and like other kids not getting assignments done on time, plagiarizing. I think I've told this story before about one of my kids just having to make a lot of decisions about how to handle just the mass plagiarization of a lot of the other students in the group work, and then he would often be the one that's organizing these work, and just kind of making those decisions. And to me, that right there is living in the real world, trying to decide, what do I do? Do I want to squeal on people? Do I want, I don't really want to do that, but I also don't want to be cast in the same category. Like those to me are the things that are much more interesting than can they follow directions at a job, because probably they can. Yeah, probably they can. It's all these other little bits and pieces. But to get back to my original point, I almost found, if anything, I think other kids are often quite burnt out, right? So when they're getting to the levels of college and university courses, they've had so many years and they've developed a certain attitude about learning. I mean, not everybody. Some people are really enthusiastic to be there, but lots and lots and lots of it's just the next step that they've been told they have to do. And so I actually found that my kids' life skills around things like that were probably quite a bit stronger. And I would say the same thing in the workplace. Um, I mean, not to sound boastful or whatever, but just like continuously getting really good feedback. And sometimes even like coworkers or managers, like they notice something a bit different about them, but they can't put their finger on what it is. So sometimes my kids have had statements like, "Oh, you were homeschooled? I never would have known that."
Mm,
But then I think they'll kind of back. It's almost like they think that they're really reliable workers in spite of being homeschooled, but I actually think it's because they're doing something they've chosen to do. and they're not so burnt out from having been told what to do for so many years. Sue, I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I had a few thoughts while you were talking. First of all, I looked at my own experiences as this is in the dark ages years ago, and we were expected to go to university, and I was ill prepared for the world because I remember one of the years, I think it was the end of my second year, and I wasn't enjoying the course. And I thought, maybe I'll drop out. My parents said, well, what will you do? And I thought, I have no idea. I'm ill prepared for the world. The only course of action is to go straight, finish, get my degree, because everybody is saying that'll prepare you for a career and everything. But it didn't because then I couldn't get a job afterwards. I got one eventually, but I just contrast my experience with my kids' experiences and their array of skills, their self-confidence. They go out there and the opportunities that they have taken advantage of. They can see things I never saw. That, for example, one of my daughters is a hairdresser and they're building up a new business. She's got a new job. And then she said, Mum, while they're building up the new job, I'm going to go out and get another job to supplement my earnings because she's going traveling later on this year. So within a day, she had a job at one of the top cafes in town. And then she also picked up a job working at a Michelin star restaurant in the evenings. And I thought, and she's also doing her passion of hairdressing, but she does these things. She gets up, does them. She has late nights, which leads me on to the point. Kids, I think if kids have a reason for doing something, they will get up early or whatever it is, do the hard work. When I, I didn't like getting up for school. I hated school. No wonder my mother had to rattle the door handle and say, "You up in there?" Uh, but when you have a reason, you want to get into your project, you're going out, or maybe you're not. Maybe you have no reason today, so you sleep in because you were working late last night. I think that our kids are self-motivated to do what's needed, but there has to be a good reason for it. And they are team players too. As you were saying, Erin, about employers, yeah, despite being homeschoolers, they're good workers. Yes, it's because they're homeschoolers, because they had responsibility, because they worked with other people as they were growing up and didn't sit behind a desk like I did. And they were part of the real life, going out there and doing things. Of course, they learnt these skills. And yes, they're not afraid of hard work. I think sometimes we elevate things on certain careers, like me and my university degree. Yes, I got a Bachelor of Science, and people think, oh, wow, that was really good. And I look at my daughter with her hairdressing apprenticeship, her qualification, and her ability to work 3 jobs in one week. And to her earning capacity is a lot greater than mine was doing a university degree. But she's just bubbling with ideas. She's going traveling, she's doing this, that, and the other. And I think, which one would we choose? Would we choose to have a high profile career, maybe that we don't enjoy? I'm not saying that all people with high profile degrees, jobs shouldn't do it, because we need doctors, we need lawyers, we need people who are passionate about those things. But if you're not passionate about it and you have some other, should we look down on other people who didn't quite get those university degrees? Now, my daughter didn't get a university degree because she didn't want one, not because she's not clever or intelligent enough to go and I think we probably talked about this before, that there's ways into universities. Probably it's coming up again on in the next point, but it's not that they are choosing second best because unschooling doesn't prepare them. It's because they have made different choices, because the whole world is there opened up before them and they don't have to follow the pathway that I thought I had to follow because I didn't realize there were other ones. I was just funneled into this one pathway and told that this would secure me for life, and nothing else was ever offered. And I knew the real world in some ways. I mean, I knew how to go to a nightclub, I knew how to socialize with my friends, I knew all this, but the working life was closed to me. I wasn't prepared for the working life. And I feel that our children, as being part of the world, they understand more about what the world offers and where they can fit into it. And so I looked at that. So maybe that was all I was going to say there. But just you were saying, Ashley, about the changes to the world. And I think about what skills I had when I came out of university. Oh, yeah, I could identify all these plants. I could set up experiments. I could use all these big spectrometers and whatever, which they probably have gone out of fashion and they've developed new technology. But what am I doing today? We had no computers. We didn't have digital cameras. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't have videos on YouTube. I've learned all these skills because I wanted to know them. And if I wanted to do what I'm doing, I knew I'd have to go and learn them. And I was curious and passionate. And how do I do this? And only yesterday I was sorting out a problem. Now I was thinking, how do I get a free subscription feature on my blog for my readers? I'm sure there must be a way. So I spent the afternoon researching and I found a way. But that wasn't me when I came out of university. I wasn't curious. I wasn't problem solving. I just wanted a job, afterwards have money, and then, go out with friends. And I wasn't curious about anything. Just that was my outlook. But my kids are so different. Yeah. Anyway, I've spoken enough about that, and I went off on a sideline that I didn't expect to. So it probably
No.
doesn't make much sense, but yeah, just yeah, our children. I think they're opening up those possibilities. They see the real world as it is.
Yeah, and something, Sue, you were talking about how um, you graduated from university and you had trouble getting a job right away or something to that effect. But I got thinking about how, if you hadn't gone to university or if you had left partway through, the assumptions that society makes around things, and yet there's something about if you've gone and you've finished that degree that you started, it's like um I don't want to say it's the school's fault if you don't get a job. That's not quite true, but it it's that's a little bit of the assumption, like you did your part, so there must not be enough jobs in that field, or there must not be. And it really is the safe path, isn't it, that kids just, I think there's so many people, they don't know what else to do, so that's what they do. And like you, there's nothing wrong with going to college or university, but it's just the idea of like, is that is is what they're spending all that time and money on something they're actually interested in and passionate about? And even if it is it what they, you know are there jobs in it if that's what they're hoping to get out of it? And I just think for so many people, they're not. It's just the acceptable step is to get accepted somewhere and go. And you can kind of blame the system a little bit, if, or a lot maybe, if it doesn't translate into a job. um yeah,
I
that's,
think
Yeah, and I
that
feel like
sorry, go
go
ahead.
on, Ashley.
I was just going to say that that seems to be something I've been hearing for a long time now from people who took that track, myself included, that it didn't work out the way you thought it would work out. You feel like you're picking and sticking to a safer path, and people are celebrating you along the way. And then you kind of get to like the end and you go, oh, whatever it is, where are all the jobs? Or, oh, look at all this school debt and all. Like it just doesn't end the way I think a lot of us thought it would end when we started out on that path and or when we were on it. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but it just came to mind. I quickly pulled it up again. Aaron, I think you're familiar with it, and Sue, you might be as well. I've just pulled them up on Instagram, and it's called Degree Free. So I've only kind of like followed them a little bit, and I've watched some of their interviews and stuff. So I'm not like super familiar with. I'm not familiar with the people at all, but I've known about their like their work for I don't know, maybe a couple of years now. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how long they've even been doing it for, but I just love seeing. So it's called Degree Free, and it says career launch for teens and young adults. And my understanding anyway is that they really specialize on like they're not well, I'm going to say that they're not against someone going to get a degree, but they're more so like wanting someone to go get a degree if that's actually the right choice for them. It's something that they're really wanting to do. And then I think they spend time even looking into like what are the actual job prospects, like kind of before you go on this path to go get this degree, let's really spend some time thinking it all through. And I think they like look at other career path avenues as well. Because I remember even growing up too, thinking about how like I know there's more out there. Like I know there's more and now there's even more. But so like however, say 20 years ago or more, when I was in that position, I knew that there were more jobs out there and just more opportunities that but I remember thinking like how do you learn about all of them, right? And so much of it is like where you live and who you know and just what you're exposed to, or at least that's what it was then. Now you can kind of find stuff like that much faster. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that, like, I love seeing this, and there might be other similar people or organizations that are doing this type of work and kind of spreading awareness for younger people and their families. That there's lots of options, and that, like, going to get a degree or a diploma or whatever, like that's one option, but there's other ones as well. And I love seeing that because I think that that's what young people and their families deserve. I mean, it's good for everyone, right? We want people to end up going down the path that suits them the most. So it's so funny to think that like there seem to just be like a few common ones as if that's going to work for everybody. Um, there was one other thing I was going to say, but I think I've lost it. So I'll come back to it if I think of it.
Mm. Well, no, exactly. And actually, now that you're saying that, Ashley, I'm just going to put a little FYI in, or maybe a plug, that Missy Willis from Let 'Em Go Barefoot and I have been doing something called Finding Our Footing, which is about like conscious parenting in the teen and young adult years. And we're going to be recording a workshop that's sort of specific to some of the things we're talking about, just around planning, but not in a really, really like it has to look like this kind of a way, but just the type of thing you're talking about. Like, what are all the different options? And how do we as parents, like, what would our role be, right? Like, how do we walk alongside? How do we um, help our kids find opportunities that just are not necessarily, what Sue, what you felt you had to do, um, versus what your daughter's doing. And like Sue, how wonderful that like she can do a very different path than what you did, but you're encouraging and you're supportive and you can see the benefits. Um, and you can actually see the areas that are, as you said, maybe she's actually able to earn more money than you might have been able to at the same age, or, there's just not that it's all about money, but I just mean to have a parent who's able to be positive and encouraging and to be able to look outside the box. Yeah.
The funny thing is, I wrote down the word personality,
Mhm.
and this particular daughter and I are very similar in personality. So I think that it's nothing to do, it's to do with how we were it's more to do with how we were educated than our personalities, because she's very much like me. And I can see that now that I'm more like her now because I'm here, there, and everywhere looking for opportunities to not necessarily earn money because I'm older and I don't need to earn a lot of money. But how am I going to support my website? How am I going to do this, that, and what am I passionate about? And I'm looking for the tools and following my passions now, and that's what she's doing. But I was also thinking about I don't want to go to a doctor who hasn't been to medical school. I don't want a doctor who's taught themselves via Dr. Google or YouTube. So there is a place for universities, medical schools, whatever. And I have also would like to say that some of my children have degrees, and one of my children has a master's degree. So it's not to do with, well, we're going to shun that, or it's also not to do with unschooling children can't get degrees because they chose to do it. I also have one son who half did a Bachelor of Nursing degree and then decided that he didn't want to continue and he dropped out. And I hate that word, dropped out. Change direction, maybe, pivot, take what he had learned and then goes in the change his direction to something that was more suitable for him. But he had the courage to do that instead of plowing on. But I've also written down these words, the university experience, because a lot of people say, I want my kids to go and have the university experience, or I would like to have the university experience. And I think, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you want to go there because you're passionate about a subject, you want to learn about it, and um, hopefully it will help you with your career later on. You want to go and be an adult after you have got out of school and live your own life, find accommodation, go out at night with your friends. I don't know what else. I lived the university experience, and I can't say that I really enjoyed it that much. Maybe it's personality again. But our children don't need the university experience because they're already in the world. Um, if you see what I mean, it's not like, oh, I'm going to go off to university next year. I'm going to escape from the pressures of, having to, I don't know, let's go back to myself. I'm going to no longer have to answer to my parents. I'm going to have the freedom to make my own choices about where I live and what I eat for dinner and all this. But kids don't need to go to university to do that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, Sue. And I want to talk about that, but briefly, I want to just say what you had mentioned about the doctor, that you want them to have. And I wanted to just I agree with that. The dentist comes to mind for me, actually more than the doctor. um, but the other thing I wanted to say about that are certain trades too, right? Like if I have somebody wiring my house, I I would very much like them. Now, this is an interesting thing though, because trades did used to be passed down and learned rather than, and so I would say that like we have a few family friends who do all of their own stuff and really good jobs, and they're formally trained in something else and kind of got into a lot of kind of home renovation, home repair work. And I think there are instances because I know them and because I trust them and because I could research along with them. I think there are some areas that I would be comfortable with. But by and large, if I was just calling somebody randomly to do something with my pipes or my electrical, yeah, I do want them to be like, there's definitely a place for certifications, right? Whether those are
Mm.
at an academic level or whether they're, yeah, or whether they're at like a practical level. But it's interesting. The university experience is an interesting thing because I, I, I agree with you. And there's a little piece that I think can be a little bit different too. Where I agree with you is that my two youngest, who didn't go away anywhere, still had like they still went away places with friends. They still went out to pubs. They still joined sports and had like they found well my one child doesn't really care about that, and the other has found ways to do that. They have gone into different cities and done those kinds of things. So I think that's the other thing, is that those kinds of experiences don't have to be attached to an institution. Like they can go with a group of friends away for a weekend, or they can travel, they can do different things. And in fact, they could probably do more travel and more experiences like that if they don't have the money commitment going into the school. So, yeah, those experiences don't belong necessarily to like an institution of learning. I do think for two of my kids, especially one, there was something about um, the experience of just, I don't even know how to quite define this, just moving to a different area. And of course, they could have done that with a job as well. But there was just something about living in like a college dorm and meeting new people. I think it was that extroverted kind of aspect of it, kind of meeting new people and just, I think, seeing what it was like. And I think you're right, Sue. I don't, like you kind of said, you had that experience, it was what it was, so to speak. And I think he would probably say the same thing. But sometimes I wonder if we need to have an experience, even if it's not that great. It's just to know we've tried something a bit different. And I think, yeah, I think that he had kind of tired of the same homeschool community, the same church community, the same neighborhood. And even though he did have a lot of freedom with any of those things, like he didn't have to do any of those things, there was just still something about like geographically separating himself from it. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. And I
Yeah,
just think it's different maybe for each person, but for him, I really felt I could almost feel in my bones. I was like, he needs to get away for a while. Like, yeah.
I appreciate that because I think sometimes we've had the experience and we value it and or we don't value it. And so we don't think it's important for our kids because we've already worked through it and we say, it wasn't that great. You're not missing out on anything. And I'll give you an example. It's not university, but it's nightclubs and dancing. And I've known my husband. Oh, I met him at school when I was 17. And so I've known him, oh, so many years. But we used to go dancing on Saturday night, usually different nightclubs that we liked. And when I look back, I think I put myself through a lot of pain for that because we could never talk. We always came home with sore throats, our ears ringing. And to be honest, I didn't really enjoy the experience, but we did it because that's what you did on a Saturday night. That was our socialization. Maybe there was a few other couples there, but we lived in a city, and that's what young people did. We went out dancing. So I'm my daughter who's saying, Mum, I would really love to go dancing. And I'm saying to her, oh, it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's really noisy. You'll come home with sore ears. You won't be able to talk to anybody. And she said to me, yes, but Mum, that was you. I'd like to experience it. And she's made these friends who also would like to go dancing. And they occasionally, well, quite a few times, they've been out on a Saturday evening and they've traveled to a city because we don't live in the city. And they have gone dancing. And it's really interesting because the first time she went to a silent disco. And I said, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a silent disco. And they wear headphones and the music goes straight into their ears and nobody around them can hear it. So they can dance and not, and other people can talk, which I seem to think is an advantage if you don't want to dance. But she said, Mum, you feel really stupid sometimes. You watch other people and they're dancing away and you can't hear their music and they look strange. And she said, I probably look like that as well. But I think the point was that sometimes we have to allow our children to have these experiences to decide for themselves. We can't be the benchmark. We can't just say, well, you won't want to do that because I've been there and done that, and I can tell you it's not worth it. They really want to find out for themselves. But I guess if they go to university for that university experience and they don't like it, they think, yes, mum was right. It's not all it appeared that it would be to me, then to support them in their decision to let them change course and not say things like, well, this is what you wanted. You're going to have to stick it out. But yes, you've discovered that that's not for you. How can I help you in the next stage of your of what you're going to do? What would you like to do next? And talk about the possibilities. But yes, it's so very easy, isn't it, to sit as parents, sit here and say, oh, the kids won't, that wasn't worth doing. Your kids won't miss out if they don't go to university. Well, maybe, as you said, Erin, they might gain something. They might gain something getting the degree itself. They might gain something from the university experience, or they might find out that it's not for them. But maybe it's the point is that they have a choice at the very beginning. They don't feel like this is the one and only next step, that there are lots of next steps. Let's let our child explore and help them decide what the next step for them is.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the I guess, beauties of being able to kind of think about that so openly, Sue, is that I think sometimes when we move away from one paradigm, we tend to like grab onto the other side, right? Excuse me. And, Ashley, you were talking about degree free, which I think we talked about in another one as well. So I definitely want to link that. Um, and I follow a lot of what they talk about too, and I feel like it makes so much of it makes so much sense, and a lot of it is really uh, similar to what a couple of my kids are doing, just as far as like the kind of suggestions they make around kind of what questions to ask your child or yourself, and so it makes extremely good practical sense in lots of ways. But I think too, like as you're saying, Sue, to allow ourselves the openness that um, we don't always know why people are making choices. So I also think about kids, I'm saying kids, young people who maybe get a degree and then a diploma afterward, or a diploma and then a degree, or a degree and then another degree. And it's not clear to people, like it's not necessarily sequential. Like it's not necessarily like getting a master's after, but maybe they just try something else, or and it doesn't make sense to other people. And I do think that sometimes young people aren't ready to move beyond. I don't know, around here I've heard people talk about like the eternal student or professional student, that kind of thing. And it's just the idea that they don't really want to work, so they keep kind of taking these courses and going to school. And I mean, I understand that, I kind of understand the joke about it, but at the same time, um, when we're talking about unschooling, we're talking about the fact that we're each on our own timeline. So maybe for some young people, they finish a degree at, let's say, 22, 23, and they really aren't quite sure, and they are interested in something else. And so if they have the wherewithal to do that, if they've either earned scholarships, or their parents are able to fund it, or they've worked and are able to fund part of it, I mean, like that, to me, that is also a valid choice, that somebody might embark upon something, and it's not that they regret the first certification they got, but it just doesn't feel complete to them. Or maybe they just really aren't ready to go into a full-time work position. And again, if they can find a way to do something different, then who are we really to decide that that's the wrong thing to do? I feel like there are these it's like, get some post-secondary education, but not too much. Like there's a lot of interesting stereotypes, right? Like you're kind of, you have to get some, but don't carry it on too far, or people have a lot of things to say. So I just feel like this framework gives us a lot of space to, it's not really about one choice being wrong. It's about what's realistic for that situation, right? Yeah. So just wanted to add that in there. There's another section here within this same misconception that we kind of went right to the unprepared for the real world, which is great. But Hayley also talks about the idea of like leaving unschooling, leaving children behind and uneducated. And so that's kind of interesting too. She says, and that leaves the old chestnut of being behind. Behind what and behind who, and does it even matter? Okay. She looks at the example of reading. Um, and, I think we've probably talked in the past about this, how reading is that's a big one, right? People talk about whether kids are behind or not, whether they're reading or not, whether they're reading at grade level. And that so much of that has to do with being able to perform within the school system. But it doesn't necessarily matter in like the grand picture of life, what age somebody is when they learn to read. And actually, Hayley has a post about reading and even some of the benefits to learning to read later. So maybe we can link that as well. But so yeah, so like what do we think about that? Because to me, this is probably almost the biggest misconception about unschooling is that kids will be uneducated and lacking in knowledge and skill.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts, but they're all over the place. One thing that has come to mind again with this is something I've probably even talked about it on the podcast already, but I thought about it a lot. I think I started thinking about this when I was in teachers college. So while I was studying the curriculum here and preparing to be a school teacher, I remember starting to think like, does this really matter? Isn't this a lot? Like I had so many questions that I don't remember having any way. Well, I guess that's not true. I suppose when I was in school, I would have sometimes said, is this really important? Do I really need this? Those types of questions. But I think when I was in teachers college and I was looking at all the curriculum for all the different subjects, I started to have a lot of questions about um not just like what mattered the most, but I started thinking like there's no way, like we don't remember all of it. So, thinking about the gaps in everybody's learning. And there's just a lot of pressure I felt as someone who's going to be a new teacher to teach all of this in such a short time to all of these students. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't remember a lot of this. I mean, I'm looking at it now and I would have been taught it when I was in that grade and I don't remember it, but that's not been a problem for me. So I had all those questions that started during that time. And then I think I honestly kind of forgot about it for the most part once I got into working. And then it was when I had my own kids and they started to get to school age and I started learning about, what homeschooling really looks like. And then, of course, once I started learning about unschooling and I started asking, thinking about all those questions again. And what has really stuck with me is the examples I read of homeschool kids who, or I'll say unschooled kids specifically. So they didn't follow a specific curriculum all of the years as they were growing up, but then they reached a point where they wanted to go do something and it required a math course or an English course or whatever, science or something. And I can't even remember like who I would have been listening to or where. If I thought about it long enough, I could probably think about where these conversations took place. But they were essentially like growing unschoolers talking about how they did take I don't know, like basic math or high school math in like a really short period of time. And I remember listening to them talk about this and thinking like, this is kind of getting to the answers that I was looking for when I was back in teachers college about, and it was, how many years do we really need to be working on multiplication and division? And, there'd be all the examples. Um, and I thought, oh my gosh, like finally I'm finding the people who are talking about when they need it, they were able to learn it. So math was the example that I think was given, and maybe that's just because it's a little bit more concrete. But you could say the same with reading too. And anyway, they learned the math that they needed, to accomplish whatever it is they were working towards in a very short period of time. Like I want to say the one girl that I was listening to talked about a math course that like it wasn't even a year long. It wasn't even a school year long. It was so short. And it covered all the math that, through elementary and I guess like basic math in high school. I'm sure probably not advanced, but it was all that was needed for what she needed to do next. And so that kind of comes to my mind when I think about this idea of like the kids are going to be behind. Because anyway, that gets me back to thinking that I just want to keep encouraging my kids and reminding my kids, like I remind myself, that we learn what we need to learn when we need it. And then, like that avid, it can be, you can learn just what you need, or you can dive into it further and learn more. And it can be through a teacher, it can be through a curriculum, it could be through a course, but you could also just learn it yourself. Um, and whatever way that looks like. So anyway, that's kind of what comes to mind for me with this idea of like being left behind. I just think like, I don't know. I have so many thoughts because I have thoughts about the gaps and stuff too, but I'll stop there.
It's never too late to learn anything, maybe that you can learn at any age, at any time. And maybe the better time is to learn when you're ready because you'll learn it faster and you'll have that passion behind it. Whereas if you do the just in case learning, trying to build up all this knowledge just in case, and it's not useful, you let it all go, and it's not really that useful to you. Mm. But I think it's so hard not to be afraid, isn't it? That just in case, two or three, those three words, just in case, yeah, three words, are so hard to get beyond that you can share experiences, you can share ideas, you can look at your own experiences, but to actually get past just in case, it's I store it all up, or my kids will store it all up, and then they will be set for life. And it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes it's a lot of wasted time. And I think, what else could they have been doing? What else could I have been doing if I hadn't been at university learning about plants? And yes, of course, that you take something from every experience, and it actually is it was a good experience for me to have because it has informed my unschooling tremendously. I've got a wealth of stories that I share, and it's shaped my thinking about children and education. And I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't had that university experience. But as far as helping me settle into the real world and get a job, it was useless. But yes, yeah, that you were saying about the maths, Ashley. I think that I was looking at some courses for one of my children who suddenly decided she wanted to be a chemist. She wanted to go and do chemistry because there is this wonderful YouTube channel with this professor with the wild white hair and the passion. Every one of his videos is extraordinary. And she got caught up in this passion and said, Mom, I want to be a chemist. I want to go study chemistry. So we did all our research and not having done a lot of chemistry at home, just buying some home kits. Though you don't do much chemistry in school these days, I discovered, because schools have rated chemistry experiments as dangerous, and it's like playground equipment. It's to do with maybe being sued later on if one of the kids has an accident with the chemicals. So I don't think actually you get that tremendous chemistry experience at school that we used to get. But anyway, I looked at courses. Preparation for university chemistry, preparation for university maths, and some of the courses were quite short, just intense 3 month, 6 month courses. And if you want to do them, and if you're really passionate about getting into a university degree, it's and so that would give you the incentive to do these courses. It's quite possible to catch, as they catch up, not really catch up, but get the information that you need at the right time for the course.
Mhm, mhm. Well, I feel like that brings us really nicely, Sue, into this next one that we've kind of touched on here and there quite a bit now anyway, but it says unschooling rules out university. And then Hayley puts being a doctor, a plumber, or a candlestick maker. And so, and then just kind of with a fun smiley face. So I think, like, as you're already kind of describing, Sue, there are paths, right? There are paths that we can um, find and figure out, and that's going to look quite different no matter where people are living. And I think it's, or depending on where people are living. And I feel like it's kind of interesting to differentiate between being behind and having a little bit of a challenge navigating the path or the system, because I think that can sometimes happen. Like, it can be, you just kind of have to figure out what's the path that's, it's kind of like that working backwards idea. That can sometimes take some time, but that's actually not the same thing as being behind. That's just getting into where you can check a box kind of thing. So, like, we had that experience with my daughter, with she was wanting to do a senior English credit, and I knew, because she had done a Brave Writer high school program, and I knew that what she was doing in that was, like, I was looking at the different literature choices, and I was looking at the level of writing that she was doing, and I knew that it was already probably higher than what was being asked for. So it wasn't a matter at all of her being behind, but it was a matter of it taking us a few months to. They had kind of switched. I think they tightened some stuff up after the pandemic, and it was hard to get a foot in the door just to take that senior credit, because she hadn't, done our provincial prerequisites for it, and so there was just a few hoops to jump through. It was actually kind of a tiring process, but that's not the same thing as being behind. That's like an inconvenience. And when she took their course, which I suspected would happen, she like got 98% in it. So, and she worked so hard, she just really threw herself into it, right? But it was very hard to convince them that her skill level, that she could take it. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's like they're two different things. It's not really about she wasn't really behind, but it was about gaining entry. And so I do think that sometimes gaining entry can be a little bit more fuzzy than sometimes is presented, depending on where you live and the particular thing that you want to gain entry into. But yeah, like there's usually a path.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because so many of us have, how do I want to put this? Like so many of us do use that system, that when someone has chosen a different way of learning and educating themselves or home educating, it's almost like, how do you make it work together when you need it to? And it really doesn't need to be complicated, but it just is, because I guess anyway, yeah, it's kind of viewed as an inconvenience, like I suppose for everybody involved, because it's just different. And I mean, hopefully that changes, and maybe it is different, like you said, depending on where you live. And I guess like how common or uncommon home educating families are. And so it'll be interesting to see what it looks like going forward and in the future. Um, it's so interesting to me too, this idea of someone being behind when I think, and I guess this is what Hayley was saying too, like behind who, behind what, because I just think for the most part anyway, home educating kids, unschooling kids are on their path, like they're on their track, like they're literally learning what they want or need to be learning at the time. So how, I mean, yeah, I guess it's just you could say behind their school peers in certain areas at certain times. But
Yeah.
then you could say the same thing's true with the school peers. Like the kids who go to school are behind in other areas that home educating kids would be ahead of. But and then it just doesn't matter, right? Because that's what I always think about is that um, for me anyway, the part of the idea of unschooling is to allow the kids to learn at their own pace and learn when they're ready. Um, so I don't, you kind of just, the whole idea of the whole concept of being behind, I just think,
Well, because whatever you're not doing, you're doing something else, right? So
yes,
to Sue's point, what could she, if you were to take this number of years of studying plants or science or like anything that we choose not to do, that frees up time to dive into something else. And it makes me think about the idea of mastery. Not that everybody is a person that likes to work to mastery, but if you are, to have that time to do that, you might become really proficient and really well versed in something, but then that might mean that you have less time to do surface level learning on for 8 subjects because
yeah,
you're diving into one thing. But often when we are diving into an interest, there's so many other things that are included in that. So you probably are doing some writing or you are, like they're
very cross-curricular
very
to
cross.
borrow a school term.
Absolutely. Right.
But it's
Yeah.
such a different experience, right? Like, um, well, I'll take, no, I don't, I'm gonna have to, I have an example I don't have permission to use, so I can't use it yet, unfortunately. I'll have to see if I can for a future episode because it'd be a good one to share. But it really does change the person's experience to learn something when they're ready, as opposed to maybe being pushed or even forced to learn it at an earlier time. That can just drastically change their experience and I'd argue ruin it
Yeah.
in for some kids with some depending on what it is, right? Like reading actually would be a good example. I saw many kids who were pushed to read before they were ready. Um, and they thought they hated stories. They thought they hated books. They thought like if that's the language they would use. I hate reading is what I would hear so often. And I'm sure by far many of those kids, they were just not there yet. And if they had been given the time, and those experiences impact them. I think a lot of those kids grow up without a relationship, a good like positive relationship with books because they were pushed into reading too soon, just to use a more specific example. But yeah, I think it's just such a different experience if kids can um, learn something when they're ready and interested to learn it. So that's just another idea around that as well.
Well, we've talked about that with not in these episodes, but in the past with everything from learning to swim.
Mhm.
Sue and I did in the first part of the series, we did talk about learning to swim, but learning to swim, learning to read, we've talked about toilet training, riding a bike, any of those things that when because we often don't wait for kids and maybe we don't have the experience um, most of us didn't have the experience of doing things at our own pace, whether that was reading and there's just like this incredible self awareness that happens when a child gets to do things on their own timeline when they're developmentally ready. And I think we underestimate the like power of that because we don't wait long enough to see what that looks like, and we probably had the experience we haven't had much of that experience ourselves of really knowing when would we truly have learned to read, when would we truly have been comfortable learning to swim, or there's so many examples, right? And so I just think we we underestimate actually how powerful that is. And so if we think about being behind, well, you know, it, to me, it just feels so much more important to have a child who's getting a strong sense of themselves and a strong um, confidence in their own development rather than checking off boxes of they're reading at this level, they can now ride a bike, they're using the toilet. like, like those things are, you know, those things on somebody else's timetable are not nearly as powerful to a child's sense of self.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking as you're talking too, like it's harder for all involved when you're pushing someone to do something they're not ready for. Like toilet training is such a great example. I mean, like you always hear stories about the battle of toilet training, right? Like how difficult it is and how long we've been working on toilet training. And you just kind of think sometimes like, well, if you just wait, it'll probably take place in a few quick days or less. Like when um when a child's ready to do something, they're more, yeah, like the self-awareness you're talking about, the self-motivation, and just sometimes like the physical, like there's so much going on in their development that makes them more ready, that when it happens it actually happens fairly quickly. And I won't say it's like necessarily easy for them to learn, but I would definitely say easier than if they were pushed to do it before they were ready. And I think with a lot of the things that you were saying, we actually push kids to do those things like quite a bit earlier than they're ready. And then that's just become the norm. And I think who made this decision that this is the age when toilet training should happen, or kids should know how to ride a bike by this age? Like who, how did this come to be the norm when, developmentally for a lot of kids, it's just not the right time for them. So anyway.
Yeah. Sue, any thoughts on that one?
Well, indirectly, I liked Hayley's words about university rules like university, being a doctor, a plumber, or a candlestick maker. And then that candlestick maker sort of captured my imagination, and I thought, how do you become a candlestick maker? So I just Googled it while we're sitting here, and AI has listed out all the steps to becoming a candlestick maker. And I thought, wow, it it doesn't you can sometimes we say to our kids, you can't do that. It's too difficult. How would you go about doing that anyway? Well, obviously, there's a way to become a candlestick maker. So our kids' dreams, maybe they are reachable, that it's worth going and investigating and finding out these things. But maybe they won't become a candlestick maker, but maybe do something artistic, some in another field. But those words just grabbed my attention because Hayley has such a wonderful way of saying things, and it's very readable, isn't it? It just captures, as I said, our imaginations, and we want to read more. Did I? Oh, I was thinking about when we're ready, and I was thinking that we don't know what's going on inside a child for the learning process. It looks like we feed information in, we've told them, and we say things like, but I already told you how to do that. I already told you that CH says ch, like for church. I know it says other things, but and so we think it's a memory thing, that you just have to have the right information and you have to memorize it. But I think there's probably a lot of connections going on within the brain, that they're building up this web of knowledge of the skill or whatever it is, and that they need that time. And that's why suddenly things fall into place, because the last connection has been made. And I have no idea what these connections are. I'm just imagining, but just imagine that all this has to be put into place. And then one day, click, the kids say, I can read. And something has been going on for that preceding period. And it's not just memorization, it's something else, being primed, being whatever it is. And if we come in too early, we don't give that child the time to do that. We're interrupting the natural process, which is very frustrating for kids.
Mm.
They're
Mhm.
not ready, but they feel they have to be ready. And then that's when we get the, oh, yeah, will you ever learn to read? Will you ever, when are you going to start listening? And that destroys our relationships. And as I think I caught the end of something there because I had to disappear for a minute, that uh, that sense of self-worth is damaged for a child when we push too hard, and it sticks with you for ages. As Ashley was saying, you don't think of yourself as a reader, even when you can read, because you don't like it, because it's associated with um, some bad memories, a bad time when you didn't feel adequate, that nobody was willing to wait for you to be ready.
Well, and that development, that's such a good point, Sue, just about the timeline of development and some of its timing. And then also we know, I think there are certain, I mean, there's, you know, crossing the midline of the body, doing certain, there's just a certain amount of physical activity that is so important to learning too. And so that's the other thing I think when kids have longer to be able to play and to be able to use their bodies and be physical, or to be able to make up stories and do imaginative things, that that feeds into the ability later on as well. So it's partly like what's the child's natural kind of learning trajectory, but it's also um, not filling kids' time up so much with formal learning activities that they can't do the imaginative play and the making up stories and the crawling on the floor, like just doing all the things, right? So yeah.
We
Um,
don't we don't on the whole value that the
mhm.
play bit, and we should, because it's that foundation for everything.
Yeah, it is. It is. Um, okay, so Hayley's next misconception is unschooling is chaos, disorder, and disarray.
I
And
love this one.
I know Sue and I just talked about this yesterday in our Christian unschooling group.
Oh.
This is funny timing. So she says, I can't tell you that unschooling will never look or feel like chaos, disorder, and disarray. We're talking about families here, and family life can feel like chaos, disorder, and disarray sometimes. The default settings of any unschooling family are going to vary according to the personalities of the people involved, just like any family. Some will be quieter, tidier, and more organized than others. Um, okay, so we like without naming any names, Sue, you and I yesterday met with a group of people and we were talking about what it meant to live an ordered life was kind of the topic, but of course it went in different directions. But one of the people was saying that what works really well for their family is to have a kind of a set time each night that they do stories and they settle in and they kind of think about having, you know, a set bedtime. Not that it's punitive or, but just that that tends to work for them all, that they kind of unwind and they have a rhythm that they do. And she also talked about how, yeah, having meals together works really well for them and just having that time. And not that she felt everybody needed to do it that way, but she just identified that, you know, she said, I feel like on the unschooling spectrum, we're probably on the um, structured side or orderly side. And I got thinking about how it's funny that we think that if we're not doing school or curriculum, that that means disarray.
Yeah.
Like it's so funny that's if we're not doing this, then it must just be total chaos.
Yeah.
I understand. And when she was speaking about it, like she's speaking so respectfully and kindly about her children. It's not, again, it wasn't like a punitive conversation. It was just like, we find that this works well for us to, um, so it's funny that that's the outside perception. And it's funny maybe that that's leaked in and there are unschooling people themselves who think that too. Like we shouldn't be so organized. Well, she wasn't saying they shouldn't be, but you know what I mean? But they were just like drawing a contrast, I guess.
There
Um,
were set family things in her day, and I wrote a blog post many years ago about I was laughing at myself and the family, saying nobody, if they could see our what we didn't, well, if they came and saw us every minute of the day, they would understand we were unschoolers. But if they heard certain things about us, they would question whether we were unschoolers because we all got up early every morning and we all went for a run. We all went to bed at similar times in the evening. We all liked to gather for dinner in the evening. And we all, not that we ate lunch together as we were talking about yesterday, Aaron, but we all reappeared at various points in our day to connect together, have coffee, make ourselves some lunch. And so we had those, what you were calling in an I was saying yesterday that I'd read something that you had written, Aaron, where you described these anchor points in our day where we are there predictable that we know that we're going to maybe have a cup of coffee at 10 o'clock or we're going to gather at 6 a.m. in the morning and have go for a run together or dad's going to come home at 6 o'clock in the evening so we'll have dinner at 6:30 and but there are reasons behind why we did that. It wasn't because we I made a schedule and said this is what we're going to do because it suits me. We all woke up got out the door at 6 a.m. I suppose that was summer when it was light because we wanted to run together. And nobody wanted to be left behind. Somebody else could have run later in the day, but they wanted the team experience because it was fun doing it together. We had dinner all together because everybody was interested to share their days. They all went to bed a reasonable hour, not staying up to all hours because they knew that if they overslept, they would miss out on the run the next morning. So there were reasons why we did this. So it wasn't chaos. But I think also it's that willingness to be flexible and someone's tired, so they don't get up for the run the next morning. Well, that's all right. Or somebody is got something on in the evening and they want their dinner later or earlier. That's quite all right. Some it's just or we decide we're going out for the day. So you don't have those anchor points in the day. You don't have lunch at a particular time. You miss out on your afternoon tea, whatever it is. But you're doing something different because that fulfills the needs on that day. I think maybe I'm talking about the rhythm that we had when we stayed home, that we had those anchor points to break up the day. And there were always anchor points, well, usually that centered around meals. So it looked like we were very fond of our food because they were our anchor points, breakfast, morning tea. We couldn't do without our afternoon coffee. That was a good excuse to come out, put the kettle on. How are you going? What are you doing? Tell me about something. Meals together, that sort of thing. It was always mealtime. But yeah, our days weren't chaotic. Unless, of course, something they were chaotic during the bushfires, or they're more chaotic when unexpected things happen. But I'm talking about a normal unschooling day at home.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, I guess, where this misconception comes from, like how people end up, I don't know, hearing about unschooling or, maybe they're interested in it and where this idea that it must be chaos comes from.
Oh, I do know that some people have that I've known who've read my blog and then gone away and said, well, give unschooling a go and have reported back that life fell apart. It was chaotic. But what they did was they just decided that the parents couldn't have any say in the matter anymore. The kids were in charge. The kids could do this or not do this. They could get up or they could not get up. And they hadn't built a foundation that I think we need within the family of, uh, it's hard to say, but it's not. Unschooling isn't a set of rules. Kids can get up when they like. Kids don't have to eat what the family eats. You have to build that foundation of kindness and consideration and why we do things. Of course, we wouldn't all say, well, let mum do all the housework because that's inconsiderate and my kids love me. And of course, they would come along and say, what can I do? Or just go ahead and do something. I'll sweep the floor today, mum. But it's not a case of that they had to. And I think down here further, Hayley talks about that just because we assume that kids won't do things unless we make them do it. And kids who have suddenly come out of a situation where they were forced to do things and now no longer have to do them, they'll choose not to do them. And that's when chaos comes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just want to speak to the disarray part because I think of that as like a physical thing. And so I think, first of all, some people, some families are like they have degrees of disarray that they're comfortable in. Um, and so I feel like when it comes to time, I would consider us fairly orderly. Like I think just because there were a number of people, there were a number of things to fit in a day. So I think that's it too. It's going to depend on what your situation is. Maybe if you have one child, like you're going to do things differently. There can be maybe more flexibility if you don't have different people to get to different places. But I think we're fairly ordered in the sense that it just to make things work, it makes sense to do that, right? I mean, even right now, I mean, my kids are adults now, but even right now, my daughter and I share a car. So we have a look at each other's work schedules the week ahead and we figure out the days that we're both going to need the car at the same time. We figure out how to do that. And so it's just a part of being considerate to one another. But I can see maybe if we didn't have that situation, we wouldn't be that organized about it. Like it depends on what you need to do. Um, I was thinking about this word disarray though too. And I was thinking about how um like for us, it seems like our kitchen is never in a state of disarray. Not really. Like we wouldn't not do dishes for a day. Like we don't do them after every meal, but we have a system. And the bathroom probably wouldn't be in disarray. The living room, so so. But our bedrooms to some people would be in disarray. None of us care that much about, like, we all make our beds, but like if I have something else happening and I've brought a bunch of clean laundry in, it doesn't matter to me that I get it folded that minute. Now for my husband it would, and so he does that. But so I think it depends on our personalities. So for me, like some people would consider that disarray. Some people would walk in and see a whole bunch of towels like sitting on the couch or on the table or something and think, oh, that's disarray. To me, that's just a work in progress. That's
Mhm.
like, so much of it is about how we define it too, isn't it? Like, um, it's so individual. It's so individual. Um, but what I was going to say with that is, I think when it comes to things like chores and kind of things getting done around the house, I think my kids wouldn't like because they're just used to they're used to the kitchen being like I've had times where, my husband and I kind of got delayed somewhere. I remember this when the kids were younger, and we would come home and the kids would have done the dishes because they knew, even though that's usually something my husband does, he wasn't there. And the routine is to have the dishes done for the next day. So they would just do them. And like we would thank them, but there was no conversation about it. It wasn't like so some of it is just they get used to the way that we live. Now, would they leave a pile of towels out without folding them if something better happened? Probably, because they're also used to that. So I think it's less about like kids being, and we're going to get to that one coming up about kind of spoiled or whatever. It's not really about that. It's just what are the norms of your household? And I think that we model that for them and they not even intentionally all the time. It's just kind of what works. Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the need? What are the needs of the people within the family? What's important to each of those people? And how can we work using that as our basis? How
Yeah.
can we live together, be considerate of others, and fulfill all those needs in the best way?
Hmm.
Because some things are important to people. Like my husband would always make sure the kitchen was clean before, because he went to bed later than me. He'd always have a last cup of tea or whatever, and always make sure the kitchen was clean because he knew I would be up first in the morning, and having a clean kitchen at the beginning of the day really set me up. So he would make sure that he rinsed his dishes out, the extra ones at the end of the day, so that knowing each other and what's important to each other also helps. But
Hmm.
Yeah,
you were
that
talking about, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Sue. I was just going to say though that that's exactly what I was thinking too about how it's everyone in the family, everyone in the home. It's each of our needs matter. It's not that once you start unschooling, it's only the kids' needs or wants that matter. Like it really is like figuring out how to live and be together. Which like what you were saying, Aaron, like that's different for every family. So like one really simple example I thought of was because this comes up for us quite a bit right now. We have what's it called? Like a little we can play music on the little speakers. But you know, like kids will just say like Alexa, play whatever song. And it's a, you know, I'm often asking them to turn it down because I mean, sometimes I'll go upstairs. So sometimes if they're having a good time and they put music on and I'm finding it too loud and I'm not really doing something where I have to stay down there, I might just choose to walk upstairs and remove myself from the volume. But other times, like say I'm in the kitchen and I can't get away from the noise and I'm cooking them or cooking us lunch or something and I can't just walk away, I'll communicate that need with them. And I mean, most of the time, because I've communicated this numerous times, because usually I find it just too loud for me, you know, they'll just turn it down. But it was conversations at different times too, saying, you know, well, what do we consider our living room and kitchen a shared space where, you know, sure, sometimes someone can just leave if they're feeling, you know, bothered by something, but sometimes they want to stay in this space or they need to stay in this space. So it's like that conversation of like, how do we kind of make this work for everyone? And sometimes that goes smoothly and sometimes it doesn't. But I feel like because like the music one is something we've really got figured out because we've just had enough um, practice, I guess, but just kind of an understanding of like I'll hear you know, the older one say to the younger one, turn it, mom's going to tell you to turn it down, right? Because they already know that mom's probably going to find that too loud. So there's just that awareness of other people's need. And Sue, I think you said like just being considerate of one another. And the other thing that came up for me for another kind of quick example is cooking. Um, you know, trying to make sure that there's something that everybody likes to have, but also not allowing it to all fall on one person to do all the preparation as well. So I don't know. I think part of it is we spend all of our or most of our days together, that we kind of figure out how to do this stuff and be considerate with one another throughout it. That it's not chaos, at least most of the time it's not, because chaos doesn't work for anybody really, not in the long term anyway. So yeah, it's not about just letting everybody do whatever they want whenever they want. It's still, we still have to figure out how to be a family and live together relatively smoothly, I guess.
And sometimes that will involve us making compromises, like you said that you went upstairs so your kids could have the music. And sometimes we do have to allow a bit of disarray in our homes while people are playing or working on projects. And we can't just say, it's important to me that the house is perfectly presented every minute of the day because that's the sort of person I am. We have to put sometimes our needs have to be lower than the needs of those around us. But it all works out. We give a bit here and take a bit there, and it works out. But yes, I could just imagine somebody saying, my need is for a tidy house, and so everybody has to respect that. But then you could say the children's needs are to play and create some mess because that's how they learn. So that you've got to get the balance, maybe have the
Mhm.
mess and then help each other clean up at the end. But yes,
Well,
it's amazing how one thought leads to another, and you suddenly think, better clarify that because that sounds like we keep a perfect household, and it doesn't always work that way, but hopefully we give and take so that everybody um, works together and is considerate because you can be considerate by walking upstairs and letting your kids have lots of noise and
yeah.
having a messy living room when you'd prefer it to be tidy.
Well, and I'm kind of glad you said that, Sue, because it reminded me of something that Ashley, I think we talked about with Hayley in a very early episode, and I can't remember which one it was, but it was that idea that when kids are younger, that their play can be like, I think I was using the example of one of my kids who we had these little model animals. And so he would create these like stories almost with the different animals, and there'd be like different, these animals were against these animals. Like there was a whole conflict happening. And then, young kids do this. Then they bring in a prop about something, right? And so then you end up having maybe 4 or 5 different types of toys out, maybe blocks, maybe they build something with the blocks, and how hard that can be. And sometimes how that pretend play, I think we talked about this, how it can continue. So it's like, it's not even like, okay, we've done this for an hour and we've used 4 different kinds of toys and now we're finished for the day. But it might be like almost a world that they're building. And so you picture if, like, you think about world building on gaming, and kids can just keep coming back to that. But when they're doing it with physical props, it can feel quite overwhelming. And I think what we talked about in that episode, but even if not, I'll just say it again. I think again, that is that communication of like how can we respect that you're building this world and you want to come back to it tomorrow, and also we need some space for this, or how can we, I think it's just there aren't like tidy answers to it, but it's just the fact that you're communicating about it.
Mhm.
And if it does have to be picked up for some reason, that you can like empathize and validate how difficult that is for them, or maybe like a toddler sibling comes through. I mean, because that's always a problem, right? When you have a child building something and then you have younger kids. And so we can, even if they can't have it exactly the way that they want it to be all the time, at least we can um, empathize with them how difficult that is, and say to them, next time let's figure out if we can, maybe we can get a board that you can put everything on, or maybe we can think about setting it up in a different room.
Mhm.
um, but just respecting how, I guess what I'm saying is, deep learning can be quite messy
Yeah.
and it can be quite scattered. And it's not just we're going to play with this now and you're done with it and now we put it away. I mean, even think, Sue, about like the process of like blogging or redoing your website. Like it's all on a screen, so it's a bit different. But if you were to take all those different pieces that you were doing, you don't finish it all at once. You need to take a break. Maybe you come back to it tomorrow. Well, it's no different really than a child who's playing more physically. Um, so there are limits. I mean, there have to be limits sometimes, but we can be thoughtful about the way that we interact with them about those limits, I think.
How about the way we try and see it through their eyes? For example, I have got loads of memories of big Barbie doll games, having lots of daughters and lots of dolls and all the bits and pieces. And they used to strew them from one end of the room to the other and have these complicated games that went on for days. They didn't put them away. But when I looked at it, or even at the time when I looked at it, I could see the joy in that. These girls immersed in this wonderful game. And so that joy, which was transmitted to me as well by observing carefully, was worth the mess.
Yeah.
I didn't, it was. it was better than having a clean room. And I often think of those times and those games, and I think, oh, it's almost like nostalgic. I want to go back and experience it all over again because it was so important, so significant, so just a really good memory, like a really good holiday or whatever it was. But I wouldn't change any of that. And sometimes I wish it had gone on longer.
Hmm. Oh, and can we just talk for a minute when you're saying that, Sue? Like, because when I was talking about it, I about this idea of kids having a number of things out, I was thinking about it from like a respect, like a creativity perspective and a respect for their space. But when you're saying that there too, Sue, it's like think of all if they were having those games over the course of a few days, think of all the ideas and the resourcefulness and the problem solving when they're playing pretend and they're figuring things out. Like there's so much problem solving and just troubleshooting and brainstorming going on all the time. And that is what that's what's needed in the real world. That's what they're going to be doing as adults. They're going to be sorting things out between each other with what they're working with, you know. I mean, a classic thing to me, whenever kids are playing, there's always something that's missing, right? Like something doesn't quite fit. So they have to reimagine, you know, okay, well, we'll use this for the roof then, or we'll do this. That's the stuff of real life. It is that like learning those skills. So I feel like when we're talking about these myths and misconceptions, so often in unschooling, and it's a little bit of what we've been doing today. It's like you take a misconception and you defend it. And I think sometimes we need to remember that we can actually, not only do we need to defend that there's value to that, but it actually is greater than the things that they would be learning in school. There's no time in school. I mean, there's no time where you get that many hours to keep deepening and specifying your learning like that. There's there's no recess that's long enough to do that. And so I think sometimes rather than just defending against the myths and the misconceptions, it's nice to also say, yeah, not only is that misconception not true, but actually look at how amazing this is. I don't know if I'm making
Yeah,
sense. We can get caught defending almost like we have, but really what we're doing is not less than,
well,
right?
the girls were telling stories all day, working things out during their Barbie doll games. I'm not going to go on about that because, you've got other things, but have you done any episodes on the value of play? Because that would be so interesting to go into a deep dive into that when so many people are afraid of letting their kids spend a lot of time playing like Barbie doll games that go on for a week. And they think, well, what else? They should be doing this and should be doing that, not wasting their time.
I think the closest we've come, Ashley, was we did one about flow. And
Yeah.
I think that incorporated a lot of thing about play, but it would be nice to do. That's a great idea, Sue,
Hmm.
to do one. Yeah.
What did we do one spot the learning?
We've done a couple that incorporate, yeah, spot the,
Maybe there
and the one about flow, I think we talked a
we
little
would
about
have
play,
okay.
but
But
still,
yeah, I think we should do one that
yeah.
focuses on play. I just had a thought about how there might be a lack of opportunity for that type of unstructured play, not adult led, for kids that are my age right now. That just kind of came up as you were talking about that because my kids have kind of just moved mostly out of that type of play. I
Mm.
mean, it still happens, but not often. And I've been thinking, like, what should this be looking like? Like, it feels like there's been something missing. And I just had a thought as to what might have been you know, partially the reason for that or to blame. So maybe we can do a future episode just on play,
That
and
would be great.
yeah, that would probably be really helpful.
Okay, so the next we just have two or three more, and the next two actually are kind of similar. I think we've talked about them a bit. So one is unschooling spoils children, and Hayley says, personally, I don't see how spoiling children is even a thing. They're people, not pastry. But we can easily ruin our relationships. Luckily, unschooling offers a fantastic antidote to that. Um, she says, yet spoiled children do seem to be a big concern for some. Perhaps our children will be pampered and lazy. Okay, and then I'm just going to go down to the next one too, because I think it's related. And she says, unschooling is selfish. So that's another misconception. With no regard for anyone else, as if all unschoolers care about is their children's freedom. Unschooling is about respect and relationships, and these only work well when freely given. As soon as we bring force into the equation, we weaken our relationships, and real respect crumbles, not to mention the impact this can have on our sense of responsibility. Okay, this next part I think is what we've touched on a bit, but maybe we can revisit it a little bit. But freedom is relative, not absolute. Restrictions come not just from the laws of the land where we live, but physical, financial, social, and time constraints all play their part. Okay, so she has a few different things to say about both of those, but I think do you agree they're kind of related? Unschooling spoils children and unschooling is selfish. And I know we've touched on them here and there, but is there anything else that comes to mind specifically about those that we haven't talked about?
The other aspect of unschooling is selfish, I have come across a concern is that if every person in the family is pursuing their own interests, then won't they all be so there isn't the interaction between kids and that, oh, I'm having a baby, say, in a month's time, and I'm concerned that my son, who is passionate about this, I won't be able to help him. I won't be able to take him and do everything he wants. But I've also got to see to the needs of this child who's interested in something completely different. And it's like everybody is learning in their own little world, and all they care about is themselves. That if how am I going to see to that child's needs and help them, as if that's what we're supposed to be doing, that we're following each child. And this is almost impossible as a mother to do anyway. And this is where the problem comes, is that the child is like we're their personal helper, and we've got three or four, five children who are all on their own learning journey, and the mother has to fulfill all the needs of each one, and like be not a teacher as such, but be at the beck and call of each of these children, and they're going to grow up thinking that they are the only person that matters in the family. And this is what happens. The mother says, I can't do that, but that's not reality. The kids all have their interests maybe, and maybe they're all different. Maybe they do share some, but that's not how unschooling works. That I demand the time to do my interest and the resources to do my interest, and it doesn't matter that a sibling needs you. I'm going to sit here and wait for you until you can come and help me. And I think, no, 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 no. That's not unschooling.
I would like to speak to that, Sue. I think that's such an interesting point. So somebody once said to me, it's funny because I hadn't, you know how people maybe notice things about us, but we haven't really like thought about it ourselves. And she said to me, she said it very positively. It wasn't a negative thing, but it just made me think. And she said, considering that you're homeschooling four kids, and at that point they would have been, I can't remember, maybe like 14 down to 8 or something like that. She said you're very individualized with your kids. Like you and I thought, And I see what she means. And I don't think that there's like a good or a bad to this, but that is true. When I think about a lot of other homeschool families, they might all go to the same park, or they might, all go to the same community center and each take part in the things that worked for them, which I think is totally fine and mathematically necessary much of the time. But I think what she meant was because I found my kids were often quite different. Um, a lot of the time it was things that they want. Some of it was things at home, but things that they wanted to be doing out too, whether that was maybe like for two of my kids, it was a lot of going to skateboarding parks and snowboarding hills. So that would take big chunks of time, right? And what I think about that is that as somebody who did kind of tend to be pulled in a bunch of different directions, I was conscious of it and it was a choice I was making. And I found that my kids, and I think when our kids are having their cups filled and they know that we're trying our best, they're quite able to be flexible when another person, not even just another sibling, just another person in our life needs something. I think when they feel important, when they know that we value what they're doing, if there's a day that we can't help them with something or we can't, like just something that comes to mind, I can remember being a volunteer with my daughter's choir. They did like an overnight weekend camp thing, and I was one of the volunteers. And it coincided with my son's 20th birthday. Now he's 20, so maybe we're talking about, we're not talking about kids at this point, but it would have been the same earlier on. Is I would just have a conversation with them and say, like, these two things are happening at the same time. Is there any way that we can, like, what can we figure out? So we left her choir a little bit early. We pushed back his birthday dinner a little bit. Um, and I found that at all ages with my kids, like not perfect, obviously not perfect, but over time, when they know that they're going to get their turn or that we genuinely intend and want to be present for them, I think it's actually the opposite. I think they get really flexible because their cup is filled. They feel valued. So they don't need to grab for it. Like, yeah,
A bit of give and take, knowing that there's a balance overall, their needs are being seen to, but making compromises and helping each other in the family to fulfill the needs of everybody in the best way. And that sometimes there are compromises that have to be made, but everybody realizes that, and life isn't perfect, is it?
yeah,
Mm. So
Yeah, and I
not
think,
selfish. Sorry,
and I
Ashley.
think like, no, I was just gonna say, um, like what you said, Erin, about how when our kids know that we're trying our best, um, I think they can see, but I think they can also feel that. So I guess it's very much what you were just saying, Sue. But I think a lot of what we're talking about kind of comes down to the relationship, like what we always talk about, comes down to the relationship that we've built with them over time. So like you said, Erin, it's not always perfect. So it's not like there's never times where someone might get upset or, their feelings are hurt or something like that. But overall, I think that there's this understanding that everyone is kind of doing their best and because they feel cared for. Um, yeah, that usually kind of works out. And like you said, it's the opposite of selfish. And so like that give and take. And that just kind of happens over time. And then I think part of that too is as the kids get older, like the maturity that comes, right? Like their understanding. Um, yeah, through their experience, like all of that kind of works together. That yeah, I don't come across too many homeschool kids that I would consider selfish.
Do you think that at different times, different children need more attention than others, so that it's not a case of I've got to divide my day four ways or whatever equally, but different periods of time, one child will need more attention and it comes around for everybody. But one thing that I always found useful was having one-on-one time with each child uh, regularly, maybe an outing each week or a coffee with each child so that we could catch up, touch base, and have those eye contact conversations. How you tell me about something and really making and make it seeing that things were okay, even if you hadn't had as much time the previous few days to give that time then, but at least one-on-one time, you always, every child, I think, always feels they've got mum's attention or dad's attention, and they feel seen, heard, and feel special because they're off by themselves, and that's really good. And so I always, I even do it now. I have one-on-one times with my adult children. I still think it's very important to make that time, especially if you do have lots of children like I do,
Mhm.
that there's always time to have 20 minutes or so with each one, though we it's like a priority. If you haven't got time, then get rid of something else. And
Mhm.
I always spend every Thursday morning with one of my adult daughters. We spend, what, 10, 11, 12, or maybe 3 hours together doing grocery shopping and having brunch together. And even now, that's important. Those 3 hours when we catch up, she's an author. We talk about writing and what's been going on, and how are you? And we swap exercise, workout details. How's your exercise going? And what have you discovered this week? And I've been working on this, and this might be helpful for you. And it's a really good time every week to catch up like that. And I just love it when other people want to spend time with me. And I think, yeah, that's important, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I love that so much, Sue. Thank you for sharing how you continue to do that with your adult children. I love that so much. Like as you were talking about that, I'm just thinking like there's the relationship building. Like there's the relationship, like the connecting and that both of you feeling seen and heard. Like is there anything more important than that, right? So important when they're young, we know that, but I think just as valuable when we're older and when our children become adults, like that's, and I agree with you that it is about prioritizing having time for it. But I also was thinking about, I remember when the kids were younger and the days just felt even busier, and I was just, going all over the place, bouncing all around. And you'd be so tired, you don't even know what you did all day, but you're just with the kids and you're cooking and you're cleaning, you're doing all the things. And I remember going to the bed and the kids would fall asleep, and I'd think, did I even spend time directly with them? Like I was with them all day, but we were so busy and we're going and we're doing stuff and they're doing their play and I'm maybe cooking while they're doing that for part of the day. And it would just feel like I noticed the days where I missed slowing down enough to connect with them, like what you were saying, like the direct eye contact, and I think why I wanted to mention that was because like I said, I agree we have to prioritize making the time for our kids and for our people, whether it's daily or weekly or even monthly as the kids get older too, like just like that regular kind of commitment to each other to connect. But when they are younger, or if you are busy, I think like whatever time you can find to slow down and connect with each kid, even like 5-10 minutes where you put that phone away, you're not doing, I mean, sometimes we're connecting with our kids and we are doing other things, and that's okay too. Like maybe we're driving somewhere, or maybe we're cooking and they're in the kitchen with us. I don't want to say that that's not valuable, but I don't know, I noticed like I really feel at the end of the day that I've connected with both kids when I've managed to just stop what I'm doing and just kind of like go to them, and if they're interested, sometimes they're busy and they kind of say, what do you want? But I just sit down and ask them like, hey, what's up? Like give them all my attention, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like really making it clear that, hey, I'm available for the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is. Doesn't have to be a lot of time, but just that, because I think we do feel like we connect with them sometimes, but really our mind is on something else at the same time. And that doesn't, again, I don't want to say that like that's great too, but I think we need to really take that time to give them all of our attention. And sometimes it's just 10 minutes or even 5 minutes a day where we just sit down and we look at them and we ask them, like, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? What was your favorite part about the day? I think that that has a much bigger impact than we realize, especially when we're busy, because it can be quite busy. So the idea of finding the time, I think, to do it, I only have two kids. And I know I can sometimes feel like, oh, but sometimes it's just that short amount of time. And I think if those are the moments where they feel seen and heard, and that they feel that over time.
And it's not spoiling our kids by giving them that attention. It's what they need.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Sue. Yeah. Okay, so we have made our way down to Hayley's last misconception. And this one is unschooling is the answer to everything. And so she says some people come to unschooling under the mistaken impression that life will be sunshine and roses forevermore. No more problems, no more worries. And even if that doesn't happen for them, or sorry, and if that doesn't happen for them, they must be doing something wrong. Yet life happens and none of us knows what's heading our way. Unschooling isn't a panacea. It won't cure you of all ills or protect you from heartache and tragedy. And there is a quote here from L.R. Nost, and it's so lovely. I'm just going to read it here. Life is amazing, and then it's awful, and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. Breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living, heartbreaking, soul healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful. And then Hayley goes on to say, and unschooling is a beautiful way to live. It'll deepen your relationships and bring more joy into your life. Okay. So there is, I think, and I mean, I'm glad we touched on this in the last episode. Sue, you were the one that kind of brought it up, that it's important to say that unschooling is very imperfect for all kinds of reasons, and we highlighted a few of them in the last episode. And so I think that the idea that our kids will be, because as much as there's a misconception from one side that our kids will be spoiled and terribly behaved, there's a misconception from the other side that siblings will get along perfectly and our kids will be self-directing their learning to such a degree that it can create a really sort of just a real ideal as far as how people think of it. So I think this is important as well. At the end of the day, we are just kind of living regular days with all that brings. Any other thoughts on that one? That's our kind of our wrap up. That's the last misconception.
I think it's very sad in some ways that unschooling isn't the answer to everything, because I think that's what people are looking for, that they're going the rounds of all their methods of raising and educating their kids, hoping to find the perfect way to avoid the difficulties that could happen. And I've been there, done that as well, that you want to give the best to your children. You want to give them the best education and raise them in a way that will prepare them for life. And so you do all this research and try all these things out until one day you come to the conclusion that unfortunately nothing will, however you raise your kids, life will never be perfect. And it's a bit of a disappointment in some way, because wouldn't life be different if we did find it? But it's just life. It's the way life is. We have to deal with so many unpredictable things in our lives. And I guess the reason that we stopped at unschooling and was that living an unschooling way of life is the best way to deal with the unpredictability and the difficulties of life. As you were saying just a minute ago, Ashley, it all comes back to relationships and how can we help each other through. And I think Hayley does say something about that. Does she say something about uh, and when problems arise, we get to face them together from a solid foundation of connection and cooperation. Doesn't that sound good? And that's the reason that we keep on doing what we're doing, not because it guarantees a perfect life, but I think like it's the perfect, I guess, perfect. way to live an imperfect life together.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean, you're not going to have a perfect life, but it gives us all the foundation, the tools, the love, everything we need. And even saying that, Erin, what you were saying about siblings will still have days when they fight with each other, but overall, we know that they're just little blips that we do see that our kids love each other, even if they get up and have a bad day. How many bad days do we get up and have a bad day? Um, Life is never, never perfect, but it's that feeling of being connected and that love and the joy that comes out of those when life is amazing times and the hope that comes out of living this that gets us through the bad times, the awful times as they're described here. And you think, oh, how would I navigate this awful time of my life if I didn't have that love of my kids, my family, and people watching out for me, and people being considerate of me and helping me. And that's why we unschool. And why I say, well, that's why we unschool, not why we unschooled, but why we continue to unschool, because it's not a, a lifestyle that ends when our kids grow up. It's something we carry forward for the rest of our lives, I think.
Mhm. Well, and I think, and this is, I think this is the last thing that comes to my mind. I think that it's um, helpful maybe to realize too that if, let's say that a family is choosing, they're wanting to go down the path of unschooling, and it can feel very exciting, and it can feel like um, just so free, right? And so positive. And so then when you are struggling to get along with a child, or they're grumpy or they're whatever, there can be a sense from the parent of like, well, I'm giving you all this freedom. We've taken this, we're doing this so that we can have this wonderful life. And what do you have to complain about, you know? And I think it's always important for us to remember that we're the ones who are doing the research and the thinking and the figuring out to take a path that's different from something that maybe wasn't so big of a match for us. Like, it feels so freeing to us because of the path that we've had as children, going to school and kind of going through this whole process. But for our child, there could be all kinds of ways that there reasons they're grumpy that day. But I do think that parents can get into that mindset of like, well, why isn't this working more easily? Why is there friction? You know, I'm kind of offering you all this freedom. And again, I really do love that Hayley put this part here. When, as you just read, Sue, when problems arise, we get to face them together from a solid foundation of connection and cooperation. So that might not look like cooperation in the moment, but it's that being together, that time spent together, that validation of how our child is feeling. That yeah, it's not going to take away those grouchy moments.
But
Um,
do you think a lot of it has to do with how you deal with the grouchy moments, that a point comes when forgiveness is needed and the
yes,
forgiveness is offered and accepted, and that we learn through this. So even though it's not 100% loving every day, we are willing to forgive and to make allowances for each other and not to hold grudges against each other, but we learn to work our way through the less than desirable moments.
yeah,
And in some ways, that's even more beautiful that we've had the fall. And I'm talking personally too. I have had lots of falls as a mother and had my children pull me out of that and forgive me. And that I've thought, oh, wow, I'm just so fortunate to have these kids who will forgive me and don't hold this against me. And they're not wishing they had a perfect mother, that they're the reason I can get back up again and try again. So that forgiveness as well, we got to have the love, but you've also got to have the forgiveness, because which we learn in a family situation, because yeah, there's going to be some terrible times as well, and not just external terrible times like bushfires and job loss and those, but the internal ones when people are tired and grouchy and inconsiderate today, even though we've just been talking about how all kids, unschooled kids, are considerate. But there'll become that day when they get home and they won't want to wash the dishes and help out because I don't know why, but that we all have those times, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's I love how Haley had this as the last misconception. And I think just about the whole series, like what a way to kind of wrap things up because you're right, Aaron. Like we do get very excited with the idea of unschooling. I mean, I know we talked about the different ways people kind of enter into unschooling, but I think there's probably always this level of excitement or like this hope that it's going to be the answer and that this is what's going to work. And inevitably, you will get to a day where it feels like nothing's working and everything is just a disaster. But like we've just said, that's life. So I think like it's just such a nice way to wrap up there because we have all heard people say, well, we tried unschooling and it didn't work. And I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe for some people it doesn't work, but um, I think like maybe this is encouragement or a reminder that that's just life and that it's not necessarily well, what do they say? They say don't quit on a bad day. Is that that phrase? So maybe that's something to keep in mind with unschooling, is to allow, maybe even expect, right? Like kind of mentally prepare for those moments that just happen in every family, to come, and that it doesn't necessarily mean you need to stop unschooling or give up on unschooling, that that's just kind of all a part of it. And it might not be pretty, but there's still like stuff that can come out of that's good, like you just said, Sue. So I just think that's really cool that that was the last misconception, because even when I was reading it, like now that we've had that conversation, I'm like, oh, right. And
I
I
love
still
what
need
you
those reminders.
I loved what you just said there, Ashley. And I've got a question for both of you. Have you done an episode about how to start unschooling? Because now we know what it is. How do you go about, like, you jump in and you hope that everything's going to be all right and you're all excited, and then you come across a problem, and you've just said, Ashley, don't jump ship on a bad day. Don't make a decision. But what would be the first steps? Have you got an episode that would help people who say, well, look, I really would love to now I've heard all about it. And Erin and Ashley have given me a good case for unschooling. And
We
what do I do next?
we have other unschool. I'm gonna have to look, Ashley, because I know
I've
we
got
have.
it pulled up.
Oh, okay.
I very quickly pulled it up. So
Faster at
well,
that.
because I was thinking back to when we first started, so I can quickly share that episode one was what do our unschooling days look like?
Okay.
So not quite how to start, but I know like that can be helpful. What do unschooling days look like? So there's a part one and part two. And then unschooling aha moments is, well, that's episode number two. Um, that's kind of at the beginning. I'm scrolling through now to see if did other ones come to mind, Aaron, that
No, not it, but I think it's a good idea. I think it's an interesting idea to just look at because sometimes we've done the same topic from a few different perspectives. So yeah.
there's another one. What is unschooling and how does it work? That was episode 18. So we would have touched on it there too, but
Yeah. And I think
there's a
that,
lot of episodes.
yeah, I think some of those are linked in the resources of the last episode. But let's think about that because sometimes people, yeah, sometimes it's just nice to have like a go-to.
And if you had a
Yeah.
title that said How to Begin Unschooling, I could just imagine people would say, "Wow, that's the one I need to listen to,"
Yeah.
even though you could link back to all those other ones to
Mhm.
set it out. Does Haley have an article about that? Because she would probably give us step-by-step help
Would I tell
on
I'll
our journey, wouldn't she? We
I'll tell
must have a look
you
at
does
that.
have. I'll tell you what she does have. I don't think she has that, but she does have one that I think outlines a lot of really good resources. Um, and Sue, you are definitely in there. So yeah, we'll have to look at what she's got as well. So, well, we did it. We got through a 3-part series in 4 parts. But I think we did pretty well to finish that up today, actually. Yeah, so thank you, Sue, so much for joining in and just lending your thoughts, your experience, and your stories. I think it's so, your stories are such a good way to illustrate things and for people to understand and relate to things, I think. So thank you.
Oh, oh, thank you. It's been a huge pleasure sitting here chatting with you. My only problem is that, there's so much to say because
I know.
it's such a deep and interesting topic. So I've appreciated being able to join you, both of you, for 4 episodes. That's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ashley. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I always forget to do this. Just again, a little bit of a reminder that if people would like and share and comment, and Ashley, you reminded me last time to pass the episodes on, that's always super helpful as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
That's appreciated.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Erin. Bye, Sue.
Bye.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Hayley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. Erin can be found at Everlearning. And I, Ashley, can be found on Instagram at AshleyAsMama and at Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.